The L15 weekly podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world.
So, welcome back to the podcast here on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed that little message on, the first intro message I've added in, which isn't me actually talking live to you. It is a previous recording with a little bit of editing behind it, dare I say. So, today, it's all things Bundesliga, it's all things Bundesliga, it's Bundesliga, the German league, showing the entire football world how to do it really safely amid the coronavirus pandemic, and the Bundesliga are really showing some good stuff in the way of the world and in the way of football. So we're going to be talking all last week's fixtures, we're going to be talking all next week's fixtures, everything Bundesliga. So without further ado, let's get straight into this week's episode of the L15 weekly podcast.
The L15 weekly podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world. Join me every Friday from 5 PM for a brand new episode of the L15 weekly podcast.
So, as we previewed all these games in midweek, it is time to move. It's time to move on to the midweek games that we previewed on Monday's episode of L15 Weekly Extra. And although there are, lots and lots of games to do a whole round of fixtures yet again, but we are going to leave the biggest till last. I know that's probably what many of you, if you are here for that, you probably are here for the Borussia Dortmund Bayern Munich game, but we're going to talk about that last. But firstly, let's begin with the clash over Bayer Leverkusen at the Bay Arena in Leverkusen, which finished with a bit of a shock result, if I'm being completely honest, where Wolfsburg in 6th place gained a crucial 3 points against Leverkusen by battering them 4-1, it has to be said. I mean, it was just a very strange game, and not one that people would have often predicted, but Wolfsburg came on top. They came back from that win, the loss against Borussia Dortmund at the weekend. I mean, that would have provided a little bit of a setback for them, but they came back fighting, and they came back and won against a team that are in some great form, which is Bayer Leverkusen. I mean, Marin Pongracic scored after a header from close range, assisted by Maximilian Arnold, and then it went on into the second half, and then it went into Arnold scoring, and then Renato Steffen scored in a good bit of form he is, and then Pongracic scored again for his second of the game, with Baumgartlinger scoring late on in the game. A bit of a consolation, it has to be said, but Wolfsburg should be really pleased with this win. I mean, Leverkusen less so. Leverkusen, if they want to get a Champions League place, this is the sort of game that they have to be winning. They're on 53 points at the moment. They're in 5th place. I mean, things are looking a little difficult. I mean, I'm recording this on what day is it? It is Wednesday, but it is before all the Wednesday's games, so I'm going to do those once they've finished. But I'm reviewing all the Tuesday's game first. But Leverkusen, they are level on points with Mönchengladbach, only two worse goal differences than them. But they've got a chance to try and leapfrog even Leipzig, who we'll talk about later in this episode. Wolfsburg, 42 points. That is 4 points clear of Freiburg, who we'll go on to talk about. That is one of the headline games that we're going to go on to talk about. But Leverkusen, they dominate possession. They had 70% of the ball. They had 9 total shots, 7 chances created, 3 big chances. They dominated possession, but they just could not get chances. I mean, Kai Havertz, for all the hype he's been given over the past couple of weeks for being really in form, he was Mr. Nobody in this game. I mean, Kedem Amiri played quite well for Leverkusen, probably one of the players who didn't deserve to be on the losing side. But centre-back Marin Pongracic was really the key man for Wolfsburg, and he was my man of the match with an 8.9 rating, 90 minutes played, 2 goals, 2 total shots, 23 accurate passes, 63% pass success. 100% of his shots were on target. I mean, he was just a real stalwart at the back for them, and also a really good goal contributions for the centre-back. And that is why Wolfsburg are the favoured team to go and hit that European qualification spot. I mean, Freiburg are chasing down the tails, Schalke as well, Hoffenheim, Köln, Hertha Berlin, all sort of in that little mix. I suppose you'd only go probably as far as maybe Schalke, that could get up there, but Freiburg look to be chasing on Wolfsburg tail. But with victories against a team that are higher up in the table than you, with Leverkusen, you've always, if you're going to win games like that convincingly, you've always got a chance of making the European qualification spots, and that is why Wolfsburg are there at the moment, and they'll look to continue with this excellent form in their next game against Frankfurt on Saturday, which we're going to talk about later in this episode as well. Leverkusen are going to try and bounce back against Freiburg in a big game for Freiburg as well, if they want to make up that ground on Wolfsburg. And then we'll move on to talk about Werder Bremen versus Borussia Mönchengladbach. It was a fairly boring game, in truth. I mean, Werder Bremen will be glad to get a point out of that game, considering the position they're in. But the fact that they had a huge chance in the game, they'll dwell on that, and they'll obviously be thinking about how they didn't score in that game. Whereas they limited Borussia Mönchengladbach to big chances, didn't they? With none coming from them. I mean, Borussia Mönchengladbach dominated play. I mean, they're not on the best run of form. I mean, they beat Frankfurt on the day of the return, but then they lost to Leverkusen in a big game in terms of Champions League. But they will have been done a favour by Leverkusen losing to Wolfsburg. Will Mönchengladbach, I mean, Jan Sommer keeping out Werder Bremen for most of the game. I mean, Werder Bremen, considering they're 2 points cut adrift from Düsseldorf, will mean that they are in a little bit of trouble. I mean, they need to get 3 points soon, so they can even have a chance of staying up. I mean, Paderborn look to be starting to get cut adrift from the rest of the pack. I mean, they're in need of a win. They play Augsburg tonight, which I'll be talking about later on in the podcast. But overall, a fairly boring game. Jan Sommer was man of the match just simply because he managed to keep out the opposition all through the game. And we'll move on to the other two games from the Tuesday night's fixtures, which include Dortmund and Bayern, which will be next. But we'll talk about Frankfurt and Freiburg first, which was the thriller at the Commerzbank Arena. 6 goals included in this game, equal terms it ended on. We'll go through the events of the match for you, and we'll talk about how things unfolded at the stadium. Vincenzo Griffo for Freiburg opened the scoring with a right-footed shot into the centre of the goal, and then after 34 minutes, Andrew Silva headed in from very close range for Frankfurt to equalise. But then the second half came and things were getting a bit tastier later on in the game. Gunter crossed in the ball, and in came Nils Pettersson, the big German stalwart, came in and scored for another goal. And then only minutes later, Lucas Holler looked to have given Freiburg the game, but Frankfurt had something to say about that, with Daichi Kamada scoring a tap-in, if you like, and then Timothy Chandler scoring 3 minutes later to level terms. And Kevin Trapp didn't play the best game for Frankfurt. I mean, they sort of just let things get away with it. Robin Koch will be put to blame for one of Frankfurt's goals. But Freiburg, they'll rue this opportunity, and they'll probably call it 2 points lost rather than a point gained. I mean, the fact that they gave away the game so late on, from being 3-1 up, and the fact that they looked to be taking the game away after Pettersson and Holler scored, and they'll regret not taking home all 3 points against Eintracht Frankfurt. And Eintracht Frankfurt will be really pleased with themselves for getting back on level terms, and that'll take them that point will help take them away from relegation positions. But I can't see why Frankfurt are down there. They've got a good side and they've got a good team ethic. They were really good in the Europa League last season, and it's strange to see them down there, if truth be told. But we'll now move on to the big, gigantic game of Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich. One of the biggest games in the Bundesliga calendar, which ended up as such a classic, really. I mean, I watched the game. I've got a lot to say about it, really, and it's going to be probably one of the most in-depth games we can talk about here on L15 Weekly this week. Joshua Kimmich scored the only goal of the game. He chipped Roman Bürki You're just before half time, the perfect time for score for Bayern. You could tell at the start of the game that Bayern were playing a more conservative brand of football. They were sitting back a bit more, trying to slow the tempo of the game down. And for me, as soon as Bayern scored that goal, you knew which way the game was going. You knew that Bayern were going to win, and you knew that they were going to win by a low scoreline, 1 or 2-0. And you couldn't see Borussia Dortmund scoring. I mean, for all Borussia Dortmund's, I love Borussia Dortmund's style. I love their system. I love what Lucien Favre has done. I mean, there's talks of him potentially being sacked now, and I wouldn't quite agree with that perhaps happening. I think he deserves to stay at the club. I think he's built something really good here, and I think this system involving the wing backs and having these wing backs have such a crucial part of play, I think is a really good thing. And I mean, as much as I adore Borussia Dortmund and their system, Bayern Munich did the job on them today. They provided no way through for Borussia Dortmund. I mean, Bayern when that game progressed and it got to about 65 minutes to 75 minutes, Borussia Dortmund, they just didn't take any risks and they played right into the Bayern Munich's hands. I mean, they played such a slow tempo, and I think Bayern liked that, and they wanted them to play that sort of tempo. They had 11 men behind the ball, Bayern Munich, for about the last 15 minutes, and it was just sort of hopeful play from Borussia Dortmund without any real structure towards it. I mean, they were just passing it side to side, and I was thinking, Bayern Munich are probably loving this at the moment. They're loving seeing that ball in front of them, and they're loving seeing them just passing it sideways and backwards, occasionally lumping the ball in, but we've got men behind the ball so we can clear that away. And I mean, it was such a great performance from Bayern Munich. It was a champion's performance. They went out with something to lose, and Borussia Dortmund didn't play like they were a team with nothing to lose in that game, I'm afraid. As you can see, they had more of the ball, 51% of possession. They didn't create as many big chances as Bayern Munich. They had lots more accurate passes. I mean, lots more of the ball, lots more passes going sideways and backwards, as I've just highlighted. But Bayern Munich, it played into their hands, really. But Dortmund's one player I have to talk about, not my man of the match, but Alphonso Davies. My goodness, wasn't he good in that game? Whether it was just showing pace to catch up with somebody who I consider to be really quick in Erling Braut Haaland. Erling Braut Haaland was looking to go through on goal, and Alphonso Davies came out of absolutely nowhere, showed such pace and such precision to get that ball away from Erling Braut Haaland. I mean, it's incredible to see Alphonso Davies performing like this, and it's incredible to see him, coming from as a guy who likes the MLS. It's great to see somebody like that come out of nowhere, really, and take the Bundesliga by storm. It's really great to see that, and he's been really great at left back for them this season. In the absence of people like Nicolas Süle and things like that. But Bayern did the job on Borussia Dortmund today. I think Lucas Piszczek, a special shout out to him, made a very crucial goal line clearance for Bayern when Serge Gnabry looked to be about to score the first goal of the game. But Lucas Piszczek, one of those players, didn't deserve to be on the losing side today. He was incredible. Sorry, not today. Yesterday, he didn't deserve to be on the losing side. He was absolutely astonishing. His tackling, his determination. He was just so reliable in that game, and that is why Borussia Dortmund love him. He's their captain, and he just put in that sort of performance today. I was impressed with Thomas Delaney as well. I think just his functional midfield play, really. I think the front three let them down. I think Thorgan Hazard and Julian Brandt playing in that wide front three position. I think they came too central at times and left Guerrero and Hakimi exposed out wide. And I don't think, I think to exploit the attacking prowess of Hakimi and Guerrero, they need to have midfielders funneling back and helping them out to allow them to overlap. And I think in the end, Bayern Munich did the job on them, and that leaves Bayern Munich looking for another Bundesliga title. I mean, they are 7 points clear of Dortmund now. If Dortmund had at least got a point, maybe there would still be something in this title race. Only 4 points. I think it would only make them 4 points behind. But I mean, it's a poor game from Borussia Dortmund's point of view, and there's talk of Lucien Favre being sacked and leaving the club. But obviously, Borussia Dortmund, nothing really to play for anymore. They'll be in the league next season by the looks of things. But Bayern Munich, another title looks to be going their way, to the going straight back to the Allianz, and it's testament to this brilliant performance against Borussia Dortmund, where Borussia just couldn't break them down. Moving very swiftly onwards to the round of Bundesliga games that happened on Wednesday night. So let's go straight into a slightly more boring one which was fairly crucial in terms of relegation, which was between Augsburg and Paderborn, which finished 0-0. I mean, it was a bit of a boring game, but one that could have provided a bit of stability for Paderborn as they look to climb out of the relegation zone and indeed off bottom spot. I mean, at the moment they are 18th in the league with 28 games played and 19 points. I mean, survival doesn't look likely for Paderborn. I think their relegation could be confirmed very, very soon. But obviously Dusseldorf are the sort of benchmark, because you want to be able to get into that relegation qualification place if you can. If you're Werder Bremen or Paderborn, you know, if you can get there, at least you've got a chance of beating the third place team in the Bundesliga 2 and seeing if you can, you know, at least giving yourself the best possible chance, because you want to be able to stay in the division. You know, a lot depends on staying on the division, like in England, like with the Premier League and the Championship. You know, people can really crash and burn when they go down a division. I'm not sure if that's exactly the same in Germany, but you know, obviously you'd want to stay up if you can. Augsburg looking to sort of strive away from that relegation qualification zone. I mean, they're 12th at the moment, 31 points. They are 4 points clear of that qualification place to go down into the second division. I mean, there's a chance that they could slip into there with a bit of bad form, but when you hold out like you do against Paderborn, who had more chances, that really 15 total shots, 11 chances created, 2 big chances. I mean, Paderborn, they looked pretty decent going forward. They just couldn't get the ball in the back of the net, and I think that can be thanks to Andreas Luth in goal for Augsburg with 7.9 average rating, 90 minutes played, 2 diving saves, 2 saves, 1 save inside the box, 1 sweep, 5 throws, 2 high claims, with a really good stat base in there. Player of the match with a 7.9 rating. Fairly bit of a boring game, if I'm being wholeheartedly honest, but a big game as well was in the way of Fortuna Dusseldorf versus Schalke, where Fortuna Dusseldorf blew Schalke away, if you like. Weston McKennie opened the scoring after 53 minutes. Yeah, it was a really interesting game. Weston McKennie opened the scoring with a header assisted by Bastian Ogshipper, with a cross following a set-piece situation, and then about 10 minutes later, Ruben Hennings scored a header from very close range. The striker for Fortuna Dusseldorf came in with the goal, and then Karaman scored again. Karaman been in a nice bit of form recently, scoring in the last 2 games, scoring in that 2-2 draw against Köln. But Karaman came in to win the game for Fortuna Dusseldorf and to give them a bit of breathing space away from that bottom 2. I mean, they're 5 points clear of Werder Bremen now. They're 1 point away from Mainz, who we'll go on to talk about in a couple of minutes' time. But they're certainly looking in good form, and if Schalke want this European qualification spot, they're going to have to work a bit harder, because they've been cut adrift from that pack that are chasing Wolfsburg, that pack including Hoffenheim and Freiburg. I mean, they're now 5 points away from Wolfsburg in that 6th place in that European qualification spot, so there is a chance that they may not get anywhere near that, and that'll upset Schalke fans, but and David Wagner indeed. But again, another poor performance, just like the one at Dortmund. They just haven't really got going since this restart, if I'm being completely honest. 3-0 to Augsburg and 4-0 to Borussia Dortmund, now 2-1 to Dusseldorf. I mean, the fact that they're losing to people like Augsburg and Dusseldorf, who are around the relegation zone, means that they should not be. They should be a bit worried if you're a Schalke fan. They got absolutely done out of that relegation qualification zone. Obviously, if you can, you want to avoid it, but I suppose it's not the end. So it's interesting to see if Dusseldorf can get out of that relegation qualification place. Then let's go on to Union Berlin versus Mainz, which we did say we were going to talk about, but we are going to talk about that, of course, where Mainz and Union Berlin could only settle for a 1-1 draw. I suppose Union Berlin, that is an improvement from the 4-0 hammering in the Berlin derby at the Olympus Stadium against Hertha Berlin. Baku scored the opening goal for Mainz, Bote Baku, who's been in some reasonable form this season, been doing a very good job at right back for Mainz. And then a goal from Ingvartsen came in and settled the score for Mainz and got them a nice equaliser in there. So they were fortunate to get away with that one, Mainz. Ingvartsen scored for Union Berlin, but Mainz were lucky to get away with that one, if you like. Union Berlin now sort of hovering around that relegation qualification place. Same with Augsburg, but Mainz, they needed a win here really to get away from Dusseldorf. You don't want to end up in the relegation qualification place, and at this rate they will. But Mainz did dominate possession, but in the end Union Berlin were the ones who created a couple of chances on the counter-attack, and they were the ones who ended up getting the point. Red card in there as well in this game for Robert Andrich. Robert Andrich got sent off in this game as well, which is never good to see. Never good to see somebody getting sent off. It was a pretty bad foul on Robin Quaison, so you can understand why he got sent off. But Mainz will be looking to get away from that relegation qualification place, and maybe they can do so with their next game when they are playing Hoffenheim, which is a winnable game. And Union Berlin, they want to create a bit of distance between them and Fortuna Dusseldorf with the game against Mönchengladbach, which will be a tough one, but could be one that they can go and win. Another game we have to delve into was Hoffenheim's 3-1 victory against FC Köln, in which Hoffenheim ended the game with 10 men thanks to Benjamin Hübner being sent off for a second yellow. But it was a game in which Christoph Baumgartner was the real star of the match. He scored twice, got an assist. Oliver Baumann saved a penalty in this game as well. He was absolutely great. It was a really good performance from Hoffenheim, and one that they can be proud of. And they're now really starting to put a squeeze on Wolfsburg in that relegation qualification place. Only 3 points behind. All it takes is for Wolfsburg to slip up once, and Hoffenheim will be in. Hoffenheim playing really well in this game. They drew the last match against Paderborn and lost against Hertha Berlin, but they're still in a nice vein of form coming up to Wolfsburg now. We've got to talk more about, and then Kane scored, and another red card earlier on in the game came to Sebastian Bornau, the Belgian, who signed from Anderlecht last summer. But Mark Uth missed another penalty. I mean, there's a bit of a theme going on here, if I'm being completely honest, where Uth wants to take the penalty over Jon Cordoba, and he does, and he's missed 2 penalties in a row now. I don't think he'll be on those penalty duties for much longer. As I said, Christoph Baumgartner was the real one who was the star of the match for me. 9.3 rating, most dribbles in the match with 4. Also won the most duels in the match with 8. As I said, 9.3 rating, 2 goals, 1 assist, 2 total shots, 17 accurate passes, 70 pass success ratio, and 3 chances created. A really good performance from him. Steven Zuber with the other goal, the left wing back. He had the least touches of any outfield player to play 90 minutes, did Zuber. But Hoffenheim, still a very good game from them, and they'll be pleased with that performance. Köln, however, just settling for a mid-table place. They don't look to be going down they don't look to be dropping down at all. They just look like they're going to just have a comfortable season in mid-table. Another pretty entertaining game from last night's fixtures, and the last of the games from last night's fixtures as well, was a game between RB Leipzig and Hertha Berlin, where Marko Grujic opened the scoreline. Yes, he opened the scoreline with Klostermann, the centre-back for RB Leipzig, scoring, and then Patrick Schick scored for RB Leipzig, and then Piatek scored a penalty late on in the 82nd minute after Cunha dribbled his way into the box, and then Lookman drived in. He didn't even get any of the ball, but he got all of the man. It was a really straightforward decision for the referee, and Halstenberg also got sent off, which was a bit of a shame for RB Leipzig. It probably didn't help. He slid in on former player Matthias Cunha, and I was surprised to see Cunha not scoring, considering he scored in every one of his last 4 games in the Bundesliga, including the game against Werder Bremen and Hoffenheim and Union Berlin. So it was it's weird to see him not score, but I thought he was going to be in a bit of a nice bit of form, but he was unable to. Rune Almening also had a bit of an Almening Jarstein had a bit of an error in the game as well. But RB Leipzig, they're pushing up on Dortmund now. I think the title race is just about over. But RB Leipzig, they just need to propel themselves away from Leverkusen in 5th place. They need to just make sure they're getting a Champions League spot for definite, because at the moment they look like they could very well be overtaken. To Berlin, nothing really to play for them. They just playing for pride, really, and they put in a decent performance here. They didn't allow RB Leipzig to dominate the possession as much as they normally do. Obviously, no Timo Werner in the side for RB Leipzig. Sorry, there was a Timo Werner in the side. I was not looking at the team sheet properly, but they didn't allow them to dominate possession too much, and Hertha Berlin limited RB Leipzig to not so many chances. So it'll be a good performance in the books of Hertha Berlin, and RB Leipzig won that they would have wished to have won. Now we've looked at all of the midweek fixtures, which we talked about in L15 Weekly Extra. Just a reminder, if you haven't watched that already, please do go and do so. It was a pleasure having Tusher on again. He did such a great job, as he always does when he comes on my podcast. But the support on the last 2 episodes has been immense. Currently hitting view count numbers which we've only hit a couple of times in the past. So if we can keep this consistency going, that would be excellent. But I'm really proud of how that's doing so far. Hopefully we can keep that up. It is now time to move on to the fixtures which are happening over the weekend. We'll talk about Friday's big match, which is Bayer Leverkusen versus Freiburg. Bayer Leverkusen need a win to get themselves into the Champions League positions. They could overtake both Mönchengladbach and RB Leipzig with a win and go only 1 point behind Borussia Dortmund if they are to win against Freiburg. Quite tight this league is. I've come to learn. Not many points separate the relegation places to people going for Europe. I suppose that's what happens when you have a smaller league. But Bayer Leverkusen haven't lost to Freiburg in the last 3 meetings. Bayer Leverkusen has also scored in their last 6 away matches and have scored 8 goals in 3 matches. And they also haven't drawn in 4 matches. So if you fancy a bet, as people do, then you can, there's some tips that you could have, mainly in favour of Bayer Leverkusen. Freiburg, I think they're out of that. I can't see them getting into that European qualification spot. But if they win, there could be a chance of that happening. Obviously, Kai Havertz will be, looking to shine in this game. Another game that particularly excites me in the Bundesliga calendar for this weekend is Hoffenheim versus Mainz, where Mainz are at home. But Mainz, obviously a big game in terms for them because they want to avoid the relegation qualification place currently occupied by Dusseldorf. And Hoffenheim could overtake Wolfsburg in that European qualification place if they are to lose against Frankfurt Mainz. So they could overtake them in that case. I can't... What's the goal difference like? Well, maybe not this weekend, but they could at least level points with them, which makes things a hell of a lot easier in the long run. Another game I'm really looking forward to, I guess I'm looking forward to Bayern and Dusseldorf, but Bayern's title's more or less won, I guess. But if they start slipping up now and they start losing and taking things easy, that could provide tricky for them. But again, Fortuna Dusseldorf, it's a big game for them. They need to get a win to get themselves out of the relegation qualification place. They'll be looking forward to seeing if they can get out of that. The one I'm looking forward to is RB Leipzig versus Köln, which is the Monday night game, which is a very big game in terms of RB Leipzig's Champions League push. Trying to keep that Champions League spot that they're in at the moment. Köln at the moment, nothing really to play for, but could be a big game to see what sort of attitude Köln turn up with. RB Leipzig haven't lost in 10. It'll be easy. It'll be strange to see if Köln actually put up a fight in the game that's coming up. We're also going to go on to talk with. It's pointless doing an extra episode for just one game, but there is a game coming up in the Bundesliga in midweek. There's only one. It's the game in hand between Werder Bremen and Frankfurt, which I'm fairly sure was cancelled just before the coronavirus pandemic. It is ready now, ready to play. Werder Bremen, a big game for them, seeing if they can, try and gain some ground. They could have a good couple of, they've got a game in hand on Dusseldorf, so they could make up a bit of ground. Dusseldorf after losing their game, and Frankfurt hoping not to get dragged into this relegation dogfight at the moment, because they're with 29 points, only 2 points above Dusseldorf. In terms of this game, Eintracht Frankfurt haven't lost to Werder Bremen in the last 3 meetings. Werder Bremen have scored 2 goals in the last 3, whilst Eintracht Frankfurt have scored 6. Eintracht Frankfurt, they should really be They should really be a Europa League side every season, but they just haven't had that competent manager. And hopefully, now that they're sort of working towards a nice solution, now they've got Adolf Hutter. Maybe this could work. Maybe that he could take them, or maybe there's somebody else that needs to come in to make them that competent side that can reach Europa League football there and every week and every year. And I mean, they can be that sort of team, but I'm not sure whether they've got it quite in them yet. But that'll bring us to the end of the L15 Weekly podcast. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you drop a like on the video, you press the like button, and make sure you subscribe if you're new. We've been doing so well with some of the recent episodes, getting consistently higher views than ever before. So if you are enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe. We can get better and stuff like that. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you go forth and turn your notifications on, because obviously there may be an extra episode coming on very soon, not this week but maybe another week, that you may miss if you don't have your notifications on. But if you enjoy the episode, make sure you subscribe, you comment down below what you think of the Bundesliga, how you've been enjoying it. Are they doing the right thing by starting it back up? Just a few questions I could pose to you for you to comment down below. And if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you drop a like, subscribe. If you want to go and follow my Twitter at L15weekly or my Instagram at L15weekly, I'm always happy to talk about football on there as well. So if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you subscribe, you share the podcast, go and tell your friends about it. And thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.